The VR Report podcast with David Gino.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is David O from the VR Report, and I have my special guest, Emre Tanirgan. Emre, how are you doing, my man?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the podcast. People have been paying attention to Paradiddle VR. It's a drum game, but in VR, but it's much more than that. Do you want to give a quick explanation on who you are and what Paradiddle VR is?
So I've been developing Paradiddle, a VR drumming sim, like mixed with a rhythm game, kind of, for the past almost like 6 years now, since when I first started the first prototype. It's been great. It's kind of a mix between a game and an educational tool. So I think it appeals to a few different crowds. And yeah, it's been great. We just launched it on the MetaQuest store this week, so that's been super exciting. And we'll dive more into some of the cool stuff we added for that. But yeah, excited to keep growing it, keep working on it. It's been great.
Awesome. Can you share some of your background, particularly your journey into VR? You started out at Disney, working at the Imagineering team. Can you tell people what that's all about and your backstory?
Yeah, so my background in college was in computer graphics and like game development. And around that time was when the first like Oculus DK1 was coming out. VR was starting to get exciting for a lot of people again. And around that time, I worked at Disney Imagineering, which for the people who don't know, they design and build the Disney theme parks around the world. So it's this company that employs people from all these different disciplines, which is super cool, like mechanical engineers and artists and storytellers. So it's a really cool mix of people. And I was specifically on the R&D team there. Where we were looking at emerging technologies like VR to see how that can improve the iteration and design process for a Disney theme park. So, for instance, we had this giant curved wall like cave system book as a meeting room, and you could load up a new ride that hadn't been built yet for a Disney park, and ride it by like wearing 3D glasses and head trackers. And make small tweaks, which, like when you're talking about a building project that at that scale, like any time and money you can save, like any little changes you can make before you actually start building the thing is super valuable for the company. So that was my first time seeing VR. Like that room was my first time experiencing VR, and it just blew my mind, and I just wanted to work with those guys. Because I was there for a competition, and then I ended up working with that team, where I just got to play with a bunch of VR, AR hardware, and build some fun stuff.
That's great. And then you took the information in terms of how to simulate user experience on actual physical rides, but then you kind of took that information and went on to magically prototyping a lot of AR experience. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so then I was at Magic Leap for 4 years, where I was the prototype developer in the hand tracking team. So, the hand tracking team was constantly iterating on the actual hand gesture recognition system, and I was tasked to come up with interactions that could properly make use of those and give them feedback on how we can improve it further. And we had in development hardware, so it was like a lot of moving pieces, which was like super fun. And then I also got to work on some of the core applications on the system, like our avatar system a little bit. It was really, I was there during our Magic Leap 1 launch and everything, so that was an exciting time to be there.
There was no bigger hype around AR with those whale videos you did.
Yeah,
I worked at the OG meta, the Y Combinator meta that was really, also doing AR. So we would watch those videos, and we were watching very closely what you guys are doing. So that was a lot of good friendly competition back then. So, so cool. So what motivated you to start Paradiddle? Are you a drummer?
Yeah. So I'm a drummer. I've been drumming for like 10 years now, I think. In college, I was in the marching band drum line, so I'd be drumming there as well. But after I graduated, I find it increasingly difficult to practice living in a city. because as we all know, like drums are loud, they can be expensive if you're looking for quiet ones like electronic drums, and they take up a lot of space. So if you're living in a small apartment in a city, like it's just a non-starter for most people. So around that time, the first HTC Vive developer kits were coming out with like 6-off track controllers. So I wanted to see if I could actually make a practice tool for myself initially. Like I wasn't even thinking of turning it into an app. It was just for myself. And then the way I tested it was I played actual songs I knew how to play in real life in VR as this test for myself to see, okay, like, will this idea actually work in VR? Can you get close enough to the real life experience where I can decide to now stick to it and keep developing that? So I made the first prototype in like 2016, I think, and just shared the videos. And over time, people wanted to check it out, so I decided to turn it into an actual app.
Now, there's a lot of other drum simulating games on the market specifically for VR. What really sets Paradiddle VR apart?
Yeah, I think from the beginning we really focused on the realism aspects like a lot more. There are some other ones that are more like arcadey, I'd say, like not trying to replicate the real life experience as much. But even from the get-go, we added, you could use your pedals with the app, or the drums actually sounded super realistic based on how you hit them. Like we really tried to nail down those details that an actual drummer might focus for a while. And then more recently, we're also looking at mixed reality now. So that's been super exciting with the Quest 3, especially because now we can actually augment your real physical drum kit with like a song, the notes for a song, right? So you can actually see the notes on your drums and then try to get a better sense of how the song is played, maybe practice a certain section again. It's for people also.
I think you're solving a really big problem, because having a drum kit in New York City in your own like domicile would be really difficult with neighbors. So I think that's really cool, and also the videos have just been phenomenal, and you've been getting such a great reaction from the community, especially on social channels like Reddit. I want to go into the mixed reality component later on, but I did want to first ask you that might be very beneficial for other developers trying to get the attention of Meta or get into the store from App Lab. Can you describe your process on getting to the Meta store? Because first you had published your game on Steam, and then also on SideQuest, and then now recently to the store. Can you share for other developers who are going through that struggle, what were some tips and tricks in your experience going through that?
Yeah. As I said, I mean, it was a pretty long journey for us, like 2016, 2017 until now. But I think what helped us a lot is, trying to build that community that you were talking about. Like we started a Discord server super early on, like maybe 2017 or something. And maybe I had like 10 people in there for like months. But, over time, I would keep sharing these drum covers I was talking about on Reddit especially, and start getting feedback from people. And I would try to channel people into the Discord as much as I can to tell them, if you want to keep up with developments, you can just hop on our Discord and you can give us feedback on here. So really trying to build like a connection, almost like a personal relationship with a lot of these early testers and players, I'd say. And then over time, that I think starts to turn more into like a community that's really rooting for you. Because like we never did paid marketing or anything like that. It's always trying to stick to organic, just sharing our videos, trying to channel people into Discord, organizing events to get people to make content for the app. Like we organized drum cover contests for a few years. So it's been a lot of that. And eventually, we got the app on SideQuest, which was super helpful for us in terms of visibility because, like when you're not on the store normally, you don't really get much visibility. So that was really helpful, and just again continuing the same process of anytime we had a new feature or new like cool thing to show, just post on Reddit, post on Discord, just try to build the community out more. Over time I think that just kept building up, and especially with the mixed reality features this year, I think we reached a point where it was like store ready, and now we're in the store. So that's kind of how it happened, I think.
And for the Quest 3 version with mixed reality, how is that experience now integrating real drums?
Yeah, so there are a few ways of doing it. The best way is like if you have an electronic drum kit, you literally just connect it over USB to your Quest, and then the app is able to detect when you're hitting your real drums at that point. So you can connect, like we have this kind of rhythm game mode built into the app, and you can play basically any of those songs in the app with your real drum kit, and practice and learn how to get better on these songs. It's been really cool. The first time I got that prototype working, I think it was earlier this year. Like it was this magical moment. I was like, wow, all these systems are working together, and I really do feel like I'm mixing, the real world with the virtual in like this meaningful, really cool way. So yeah, we're excited that other people get to try that now, and yeah, we're just excited. I'm super excited to get feedback and keep improving it, I think.
That's super cool. Like you've identified an audience, which are people who love playing drums that may want to be better at drums, or don't have the physical space to actually have a drum kit and have to interfere with sound. So you identified that as the kind of persona. In terms of getting organic traffic, you really focused on Discord, trying to have good interaction by providing videos, early builds, getting that feedback. And then doing some marketing activations by helping some developers. Hey, come make your own content, having contests. Those are all real cool. In terms of that community building, though, what, in hindsight, if you were to go back and give younger Emre advice, what are 3 things that you learned? You're like, wow, if I had these 3 things that I wish I knew at the early stage, this could have helped me tremendously.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I learned that really surprised me was like how willing people were in the VR community to test stuff that's like very much in development, like very early builds of things, and give you really helpful feedback. Yeah, I just wasn't expecting that. I thought I had to have like a finished thing, and I released that, and then we see what people say about it. But that took me a little while to learn, and once I figured that out, it made this whole iteration so much more both motivating for me and the development team, I think, because you see actual people using your tool and giving you helpful feedback, and that keeps you going. But I think the community also appreciates seeing that, because unlike like a big game studio or something, they're directly interacting with a game developer, and like their ideas might even make it onto the game or like app they're using. So it creates this special connection, I think, on both sides. So yeah, that was really interesting for me. The other thing was, I think I was overthinking some of. So we mentioned like posting on social media. I'm not a huge social media person. I don't use them a lot, so I was always exaggerating in my mind of like how I was gonna share all this stuff, and like was I gonna say the right thing, and I think I would kind of keep pushing back certain announcements and things because I didn't think I knew the right thing to say. But weirdly enough, like the less I started worrying about that stuff, the better our posts started doing, and like I've been trying to see it more like it's just a conversation with people. Just you just post something cool, and when people comment, you just want to have a conversation with them and actually want to hear their real opinions. So again, like if I had made that realization earlier, I think I probably could have been sharing a lot more online and just like involve people in our development process a lot more. That's still something we want to do more, but we still try to share as much as we can, like publicly on social media, I think. So that was the second thing. Yeah, I'd say the third thing I realized was that because this was like my own kind of little project I was working on the side, I think initially I was like very protective of it. I was worried about like involving more people on it. Like I wasn't sure if there should be more of us working on it, and I was just I just wanted to finish this project of mine and like put it out in the world. But I think I could have like opened it up more early on and like let more people help me out in the process with development and everything. Like now we have people in our community actually building tools around the app, and they're all like excited to be doing that, and we share some early builds with them. I think initially I was still like kind of like, yeah, weirdly protective of what I was building. So I think I'd be a bit more open and just like relaxed and share more with our community if I was doing it again. But you know, it took us years to realize all this stuff. So yeah, I'm still happy with like the community we have right now.
That's invaluable information. I really appreciate you being so transparent on that. I could see from people in your community, especially some of the comments that I've read, some of them are musicians. Can you share how some musicians are actually incorporating Paradiddle into the actual workflow?
Yeah, yeah. So that's something that's really valuable to us because musicians are actually the best people who make the best content with the app, honestly, because they'll make things like that we hadn't really thought of in the past. But so the core of the app, I mean, we talked about different aspects, but the core of the app is a realistic simulator. So we have over 60 realistic percussion instruments in there that all like sound very realistic when you hit them differently, like stronger versus slower, like softer. So you can actually connect that to your own audio software if you want, over MIDI, or just get the raw output and yeah, very easily include that in your workflow for audio production, because it's much easier than getting some like $500 like drum pad or fancy like equipment like that. If you just have a drum part you have in your mind, it's super easy to just play that out and record the output. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely heard from people who are using this as part of their workflow, and yeah, that's been really cool. I'd say that's like a small percentage of our user base, but that's like a really valuable part because yeah, those types of use cases, that's just so cool that like someone can use this tool to actually make music and make their process easier, I think.
That's interesting. It would be also a good exercise to figure out who this user is and where they actually use their workflow, and to figure out if you're delivering on that, so then more people like that can understand like, hey, the cost of getting a VR headset and buying the software is so much more cheaper than doing that exact same thing in real life. That's fantastic. As a CEO and also founder, are you starting to think of business expansion and in-app purchasing? How do you go about thinking about that, especially when you could kind of automatically imagine how that would work with a drum simulator?
Yeah, so we've been thinking of some expansion packs similar to what some like other rhythm games have been doing. I think that'll be like a straightforward place for us to start, like adding songs from well-known musicians, or even partnering up with them on certain exclusive like items in the app. Maybe you get a well-known band and get their drum kit in the app or something like that, just to make that experience even cooler for people. And we've also been talking to some like educational partners. I mean, I've already heard of some people using the app in like music schools and music lessons and stuff in like really small settings, but we've talked to a few partners on potentially like marketing this to schools who might be interested, because instruments can be really tricky for various reasons. Like if you have a VR headset, maybe now you have access to a whole music studio, right? And you can have people experiment with instruments they would have never been able to play before. So that's something else we're thinking about. And then more recently with the mixed reality expansion, I'm also been wondering what it might look like to partner up with like a drum manufacturer maybe. I'd say like we haven't made a ton of progress on that yet, but just because it's so new, right? It's now we're suddenly talking about augmenting a real object. So it's interesting to imagine what that might look like if you were to actually partner with the creator of that object, like what that tighter integration might look like.
I really like that idea, because if you consider all the real drum manufacturers, I don't think that they would consider this as competing. They would consider this as like a first touch for someone at maybe at their early teens thinking about drums and all those issues that you described. Their first experience is with a professional drum set manufacturer, and also obviously they're probably thinking of other digital channels that they want to grow their brand. So I think that's a really great idea. Going back to Paradiddle growing your community, can you describe the community personalities so far? We described one persona, which are real musicians. Are they? Can you describe others? Are they real hardcore VR gamers? Are they people just interested in sim training?
Yeah.
Are they drum fanatics?
So when we first started, I'd say our community was leaning more like existing musicians or drummers that were a bit more interested on the sim aspect of things and a bit more hardcore, I'd say. And that was because we didn't really release the first version of the app with this rhythm game mode I was talking about. So it was just the virtual drum kit. So you just had your realistic instruments, you would set them up and freely play. And the feedback we got a lot was there were a lot of people coming into the app who had never played the drums before, but they would just say like, well, I don't know how to play the drums, so I don't know how to use this app because I'm just setting up my drums and banging on them, but I don't know what to do. So after that, we decided to really appeal to that crowd a bit more. So that's when we added the rhythm game mode where you can really play a song on an easy difficulty and it's almost like playing an arcade game. But it still starts teaching you some of those skills like timing and where your drums are laid out. And over time, if you make it all the way to the expert level, like you can really, like I'll regularly hear from our players who will start in VR and then go to an actual drum kit, and then their friends will be like so surprised because they're just like, oh yeah, I've just been playing in VR, but like I can play this song now. So that's when we really started appealing to a bigger crowd, I'd say, and that's much more of the VR gamer crowd. Like they'll maybe come in having played other rhythm games, but they want to also learn a real life skill, and then they kind of find that combination in Paradiddle because not only can you have fun, but you can also start teaching yourself skills you can apply to real life, right? Along with that, we also added lessons, like 10 kind of basic lessons into the app. So if you don't know anything, it'll show you things like, how to set up your snare drum and your hi-hat and really basic concepts just to get you started and make that process slightly easier.
It sounds like an all-in-one package for people to get on board with real drum kits, and gamifying it makes total sense. Are we far away where someone, let's say they're a music teacher, and they say, hey, this is super cool because, I don't have to bring a drum set or bring people to my house. I can be portable. Are we at that stage with Paradiddle that a music teacher can then take this and teach this to students and it'll be just as effective as real drums?
Well, I don't want to claim that it's just as effective quite yet, but like I have heard from music teachers who have incorporated it in their classes, and especially in cases where, like again, you can't afford all the instruments, all the percussion instruments, right? Whereas like the app comes with over 60. Like we have giant marimbas and xylophones and things. So I've heard from music teachers just like putting their students in there to show them that experience, to get them used to that a little bit. And now actually another interesting thing is that with the release this week, we added multiplayer. So you can actually, like you and I can connect to each other and you will see all my drums and I will see all your instruments, and you can show me something right next to you and like I can repeat that and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So that opens up a whole interesting like new use case for remote teaching, I think, or even performances. So that could be a totally new way. Like maybe you have a whole class in there and you're showing them something. So I've been really excited about that, I think. But yeah, it's just I just think about it as like removing the limitations of the real world and just making that experience more accessible. Like the more people we can have playing instruments, spending time in here, like I think that's just overall positive, right?
Yeah, real life skills are definitely important. Like, learning Beat Saber, which is a great game, but the real life skill, you're not going to be able to have that applicable in the real world today anyway, but drums for sure. What other support and involvement are you looking for from the VR community to further enhance Paradiddle VR in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in terms of support, as I said, like we just had this new big release this week. So I think I'm mostly excited about people using the app in interesting ways and recording that and showcasing that. Like over the past year, we had to do a lot of work in trying to showcase different use cases, but now that it's out in the wild, like I just really want to see other people sharing their, maybe you're a music producer using it in your workflow. Maybe you're a real drummer, you have a real drum kit, and you're incorporating this to augment that. Like I just want to see all these use cases and how people are using that. And more of that other people are sharing. I think it just helps grow our community. And also feedback. Again, like I keep saying Discord, but since we launched earlier this week, I've just been on there nonstop, like responding to people's feedback and questions and everything. And I've already written down a ton of stuff in terms of like what we can improve for the next update, like in a couple of weeks. That's just super helpful because the mixed reality is so new as a concept, and even the workflow we added as this in this release, like the more we can understand about how people are using it, what their frustrations are, I think we just keep improving the app. So yeah, that's mainly what I'm excited about, I think. Like now that it's out in the wild, just people using it.
That's great. And all those use cases make sense. And Meta should be supporting them because it actually helps people buy the Meta Quest 3 with a real world problem that they're solving. You know, I really like the idea of multiplayer. Sorry, I cut you off. Were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say we do hear, anytime I share a video lately, especially with the mixed reality stuff, people are like, oh, I need to buy a Quest just so I can like do this with my drums.
Yeah.
I have heard that a lot this year.
Yeah, I call it hobby training. All those hobbies that you can do virtually, I think it's definitely a painkiller for a lot of people. In terms of the responsive Paradiddle's new feature with multiplayer, I think that makes sense because, you know, teaching someone that may be in a different location, like maybe even your real life music teacher, what do you think about collocation? Because I would think that, you know, collocation just seems like something that a lot of developers aren't leveraging. Is it just too difficult with the way you have built Paradiddle to actually have co-location and to have someone right next to you guys could jam together, learn from each other? Or is that just kind of a different experience because playing drums, it's a one person thing? I don't. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, we've thought about it a little bit. I think the main difficulty right now is it's sometimes hard enough to get like people with VR in general, so having them in the same place physically, like when I think about it as a developer, there's immediately like I calculate the trade-off of like, okay, we're gonna spend this time developing this feature, but like how many people realistically will be in the same exact spot with their VR headsets, like trying to use the app in this way. And I think the use case question you mentioned is also interesting. Like I could see a co-located like band experience where people are on different instruments maybe. And you know, in fact, that is something we're thinking about maybe as part of Paradiddle, maybe as something else like in the future. But with the same type of instrument, yeah, maybe this like teacher use case we were talking about, something like that. But yeah, I think we wanted to start with the kind of widest audience first and then start adding the more like niche features in. So yeah, I mean, we'd definitely be interested to explore it more. I think we just wanted to, but multiplayer gets people remote from each other, like next to each other in VR, right? So that's kind of where we wanted to start, and then I think we can build towards co-location.
Yeah, I think that's a great use case of multiple drums because then you actually have a band. So that makes total sense. I always ask this. What are some of your predictions in the industry for short term, let's say 3 to 5 years, and then long term, 8 to whenever?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge believer in AR and mixed reality. I think just, you know, from Magic Leap and just seeing how the industry has been developing, I do still believe that, you know, AR or mixed reality devices will replace our current like computers, and like most of the use cases that our current devices have, I think can be replaced by these next generation of devices. Estimating time has always been tricky because asked this question 5 years ago, and when I was at Magic Leap, I would also say in 5 years we'll be there. But I do think this year, seeing everything coming out from Meta and Apple and everything, I think like 4 or 5 years is a good prediction for when, AR devices are becoming more mainstream. And it's easier for me to say that about AR than VR because I do think AR has like much more applications that are outside of gaming that like a more mainstream audience might be interested in. And then further on, I mean, there's just so much cool like just R&D going on like AI or even brain interfaces. Like that's something, that I think is really cool and just seems not explored that much right now. So I'm interested to see the next generation of like computing interfaces, what that's even gonna look like. Like, are we gonna see anything, or are we just gonna think it or just speak it and it'll just happen? So yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to be part of it. I think it's just exciting to be a developer in that space, just seeing it evolve that fast.
Emre, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our interview. Anywhere people can find you, and also how do they get to your community to contribute?
I post sometimes on Twitter about the app and the development process, and then our Discord I think is a perfect place to keep up with developments. I think it's discord.gg/Paradiddle, pretty easy. And those would be the best two places I think.
Awesome, Emre. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.